please help me welcome Mr. Tom Byrne to the stage.
Well, thank you. I think this morning's two panels went extremely well. Before I introduce Pat Wilson, I'd like to follow up on one point raised in the panel we just had on the role that immigration could play in alleviating workplace shortages in the U.S. And I was in Korea last week with 8 members of Congress from the lower house, and this issue came up actually with many of our with a bunch of our meetings with senior business leaders who have investments here in the U.S. And unfortunately, I didn't come away with much hope that both the Congress and the administration would really tackle this forthrightly, because it's our immigration, the visa documentation, the visa classification system is Byzantine and tangled up in all that, and it will take, I think, a lot of focus and work to solve that. But hopefully, as Winston Churchill said, in America will always do the right thing after it tries everything else unsuccessfully. Secondly, I heard from a bunch of our participants that the name of General Skip Sharp. So Skip Sharp was a U.S. Forces commander, I think, from 2008 to about 2011 in Korea, and he's on the board of the Korea Society. He is a director on the board of the Korea Society. He's also the chair of our new strategic planning committee that actually led to us coming down here. And I'd like to thank Skip for all his work. He helped tremendously in forming our first panel. So let me turn to Pat Wilson. Pat has served as the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development since 2016. In this role, Pat leads the state agency responsible for creating jobs and investment opportunities in Georgia through business recruitment and expansion, small business support, international trade, tourism, as well as the arts, film, music, and digital entertainment industries. Prior to becoming commissioner, Pat served as the department's chief operating officer and deputy commissioner for global commerce. Before joining the department, Pat also served the state of Georgia in his work with federal officials in Washington, D.C. He is a native of Franklin Springs and a graduate of the University of Georgia. At a personal level, I'm very happy to see Pat again. It was just a month ago when we met in New York City at the Korea Society's office, where he was a panelist along with his counterparts from the state of South Carolina and Ohio in an interview series program that's on our website titled Catching the K Investment Wave in the USA. So if anyone of you who surfed in high school or younger would know that's a Beach Boys song inspiration. So please help me welcome to the stage with your applause, Mr. Pat Wilson.
That was a very kind introduction. Tom, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I tell you, I really didn't know what to expect when we started down this path, talking about this several months ago, and I was thinking, be generous, 50, 75 people in a room talking about Korea. I think the attendance today shows a lot of hard work from the Korea Society and the backbone of getting this out, but it also shows how dynamic and integral this relationship is right now. And so I want to thank you all for coming out to participate today, because it really is a celebration. Today's celebrating really one of the most nationally, one of the most important relationships we have at a federal level, but on the state level. And I think I saw my friend Clark Thompson over there from South Carolina. I think I speak for my surrounding states to say that economic development coming out of Korea right now is probably our most important relationship as well. And so that's a real statement to all the people in this room, because it is it takes a village in order to make economic development happen. So I want to say thanks to Tom and the Korea Society, Jonathan, the entire team. You guys have done an amazing job organizing. It's a privilege to be here with Consul General Park, and you guys, this guy is the most ubiquitous person in the Consular Corps. He is everywhere I turn around and does an amazing job of representing not only his home country, but the relationship importance that Korea has right here in the Southeast. I also want to thank our panels, and I'm lucky that I got here in time to see the generals, because you guys navigated some very tough questions from Ambassador Shapiro. It was a little bit of, and that's why I love when Charles is going to be interviewing people. He takes his ambassador hat off and he gets a little undiplomatic, and I appreciate that very much. And then to our previous panel, it's funny. I felt like all my talking points have been given away by the previous panel. From Stuart and Steve, it truly is a pleasure to work with two of the most innovative and exciting companies in the world between Kia and SK. We're proud that they call Georgia home. Delta Airlines, I mean, my gosh, Delta and Korean Air partnership, we can't do what we do without connectivity. Business follows connectivity, we all know that. But Delta Airlines truly is the backbone of so much that we do, and having that direct flight is a big part of why Georgia has been so successful. And I landed last night after a number of delays in Heathrow yesterday afternoon, and it was not Delta's fault. I can say that. Heathrow is kind of a disaster right now. And when I got home from that direct flight at 9 o'clock, which was supposed to be at 4 o'clock, it's nice to go to my bed, right? I'm not connecting anywhere else. And so to our friends at Delta and Korean Air, thank you for what you do. So, like I said, I feel like the last panel really gave away a lot of what I'm going to talk about. I've been in this job for 6 years as commissioner in the department for a number of years before that. In that role, I've had the honor of introducing the governor many times, and as my team will tell you, sometimes I get off my notes, just like I'm doing right now. And I tend to go through a number of statistics and try to point out what Governor Kemp has done for the economy, and Governor Deal before him and Governor Perdue before that. And there have been so many times where I've walked to the podium, or I've left the podium, and Governor Kemp walks up and says, well, Pat basically said everything I was going to say. And so I can say that Uni and Steve and Stuart basically said everything I was going to say today. But I do want to say that on behalf of Governor Kemp, I want to bring his greetings, because if he weren't traveling today, he would have been here. This relationship is extremely important, and this is a priority for us as a state, and really as a department, as the Department of Economic Development. And so he really would have been here today, and I'm sorry that he couldn't. But this event really couldn't be at a more timely moment. The United States and Korea and Georgia continue to celebrate this ever-strengthening connection. While the Biden Summit, and Uni talked a little bit about it, occurred in May, and it highlighted a lot of pledges to continue to deepen and broaden cooperation on critical and emerging technologies, we are glad to have bilateral commitment already established here in Georgia. So we actually opened our office in Seoul 35 years ago, which is pretty amazing. If you think about, I was just talking a little earlier about where Georgia has been and where we've always been looking. To say in 1986 that we're going to start a relationship in Korea at that time was a big deal. And we have had continuous representation in Korea since that time. Conversely, we also have this relationship that Korea has established in Atlanta. They opened an office, ROC opened an office in 1971 right here in Georgia, and has had continuous, very solid relationships in Georgia. And as I said, Consul General Park is another great example of the tremendous diplomats that we've had that have rotated through that office. Our state's long-term commitment to diplomatic, cultural, and business engagement in Korea has supported truly transformational growth over decades. So just this March, we were excited to celebrate with Kotra as they opened their Atlanta office, the 8th in the U.S. That's a big deal, having that direct connection with Kotra. To give some additional perspective on the results of this very important relationship, there are at least 100 Korean-affiliated companies, and I think Uni actually raised my number today, but at least 100 affiliated Korean companies operating in Georgia, employing more than 22,600 Georgians. That ranks very high in our list of countries that are employing Georgians. And we've had 130 new locations or expansions by Korean companies since 2010, largely focused in areas of exciting jobs of the future. And so think about Kia, think about the supplier network, SK, think about Q-Cells, Hanwha Q-Cells, which is another fantastic company that located to Georgia. These are the jobs of the future. During FY21, Korea created more jobs than any other country in the state of Georgia. So we've come a long way in a very short amount of time. This strategic alliance is so important that it was Governor Kemp's first economic mission when he became governor, was we went to Korea to go visit companies that had already started doing business in Georgia to say thanks. And that's one of the things that I think is important, that we continue to say thank you to the Korean companies that continue to hire Georgians and give jobs and opportunities across the state. So I also want to point out Uni Kim, it was said earlier, Uni has been directly responsible for tens of thousands of jobs that have located to this state, billions of dollars of investment. Georgians and communities have changed around this state because of the hard work of Uni Kim, and I really appreciate her friendship, her commitment to this relationship. She has continued to grow this relationship and is really a key cog in all the success that we've had over the last few years. In 2021, Georgia's total trade with Korea was nearly $10 billion, growing 22.5% from 2020. These numbers, I know it's hard when you're having lunch to think about what these numbers mean, but I think the underlying fact is it means that this is a very healthy and thriving relationship. So to break it down just a touch more, Korea is our third largest importer nation, growing 23% from 2020. That's an amazing number, growth of 23%. Fifth in total trade, and our 10th largest export market, growing 14% between 2020 and 21. Our direct flights, which I mentioned, are the backbone of really a lot of that connectivity. We have 12 times a week that you can get from Atlanta to Seoul directly through two of our very important partners. So that makes it easy for us to connect businesses, educational opportunities, and, of course, pleasure, because we know that Georgians love to go to another hot country in the summer. The Georgia Ports Authority in Savannah and Brunswick has established relationships with all 5 ports in Korea. There's 7 regular shipping services between Busan, Savannah, and then Brunswick has regular shipping services with all 4 other Korean ports of call. But our business connections lead to more cultural connections too, becoming really part of the fabric of our communities. West Point is a great example, a community that has embraced Kia, but has also that embracing has changed the fabric of that community. So Atlanta, as many people don't know, has the 3rd largest Korean community in the United States, behind LA and New York. Annual festivals like Soul of the South Restaurant Tour in Gwinnett, the Atlanta Korean Festival in Norcross, and share the Korean community's culture with other Georgians, and really communities that would not have that connection if it weren't for those festivals. We're so proud of our innovative and EV manufacturing community in Georgia, and Kia, of course, has been a backbone of that. SK Battery really launched us into that field. They are major players, and they continue to grow. Just in May, of course, we announced Hyundai Motor Group will build their first fully dedicated EV and battery manufacturing plant in Georgia. That's a transformational project. 8,100 jobs, $5.5 billion of investment. But as we talked about earlier in the panel, that's a supply chain that doesn't exist in the United States right now. 100% of anode materials coming out of China. This is what we see as opportunity. We see this as a seed field of opportunity for economic development across the South. These are the jobs of the future. This is the industry of the future. We know it's all moving in that direction. So it's imperative on us as southern states, as state governments, to go out and recruit those jobs. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for Kia to manufacture all their electric vehicles right here in Georgia. And the way we do that is we go get the supply chain too. And we've seen some amazing opportunity with that over the last few years. The other piece of that is due to the global shipping costs, and I think Uni mentioned this too. The ongoing supply chain disruptions, lockdowns in China, just the pure logistics numbers right now. And so what's fascinating to me is for years and years, for the last 50 years, we have focused on making things cheaply in China and bringing them to the United States, into the consumer market. When the logistics cost enough to level that playing field where the labor cost actually does not make as much sense, this is another opportunity. And the question was really fascinating about, all right, are we seeing supply chains move? Are we seeing there be a change from that made in China label? It takes time. It's, again, for 50 years we have developed that network. But what I can say is from talking to companies across the United States, that is a real movement, and it's happening, but it takes time. Companies are pivoting, and they're not necessarily moving operations out of China, but they're repositioning. They're looking to diversify operations to make sure that we don't run into the same supply chain issues that we saw during COVID. We're seeing an amazing opportunity to leverage this moment and work together to bring those companies right here to Georgia. But I can tell you there's enough prosperity to touch many of our southeastern states as well. And a great example is the SK Group. So SK established their first facility in Georgia in 1996. It was our first Korean investment, was that facility in Covington, Georgia. So now, after 1996, the year I graduated college, that company has continued to invest across the board in Georgia. So SKCC, SK On, SK Battery, we have another new announcement in Covington, coupled with SKC, that's going to make glass substrates for semiconductors. These are cutting-edge jobs. These are the future. And it's amazing that as a company or as a country, as the companies in that country that continue to invest in R&D, that these companies are on the cutting edge of major transitions that we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. What I love about SKC's investment back in Covington for the semiconductor substrates, that technology was actually developed by a Korean professor at Georgia Tech. He goes back to Korea, develops, learns how to scale that technology with an amazing company, and then they bring it back here to hire Georgians and reinvest in a community that has already been very important to SK's entire history. So that's a great example of how our educational assets not only provide the highly trained workers, but the technology and the developing solutions that help these companies continue to innovate into the future. Georgia truly takes a partnership approach to supporting our industry. We know that companies will continue to innovate and thrive, and when they do that, they will reinvest in the communities where they've already landed. We have to continue to listen to each other and foster these opportunities, and I truly believe that no one does it better than the state of Georgia, as we've heard from our friends on the previous panel. We appreciate that the Biden administration is focusing on closer collaboration, and honestly, anytime our federal government can lead to lowering barriers and giving companies the opportunity to navigate internationally, that's a positive thing. And so focusing on this closer collaboration with partners in the Indo-Pacific, especially since that partnership with Georgia and Korea is already robust, that's only going to be more opportunity for us. While the Indo-Pacific economic framework can be helpful with tech and services agreements, Georgia's already leading in the areas of automotive, EV, battery production, and establishing that supply chain in the U.S. And while sub-bilateral opportunities continue to be encouraged, Georgia is showing how to lead to a brighter, more connected, and clean future. So I'm going to end because I think Uni threw out a lot of my great statistics. But what I'd love to do is take any questions that you guys have, and I know it's hard to do over lunch, and honestly, I'm a little sleepy after landing so late last night. So I think some interaction would be great. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer it.
You talked a lot about the investments from Korea to Georgia specifically, but are there any domiciled Georgia companies that are opening up greenfield operations in Korea?
Absolutely. I mean, Georgia's blessed to have some of the biggest and best international global companies in the world, right? Even Coca-Cola is sitting right here. We know that there are at least 20 Georgia companies that have operations in Korea and have built facilities over there. As I think the Biden administration continues to make it easier for us to move back and forth, I think you're going to see some of the tech companies. I think that's a real opportunity. Atlanta is a global hub for fintech, cybersecurity. I was just in London meeting with some of our major players in the cybersecurity field. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity in Seoul, and I'm hoping that that framework can provide that opportunity to grow it. But yeah, currently we have a number of Georgia companies that are operating over there. In fact, I always loved it when I enter market many times. If I haven't been to a place in a while, my first 3 meetings are with Coca-Cola's on-the-ground boots, Delta Airlines on-the-ground people, and UPS, because nobody knows the market better than those 3 companies. And it's almost like I would never say a bad thing about our State Department. I love our State Department and the Commercial Service, but they're my State Department. The relationships are amazing.
Can you talk for a minute about what you just mentioned, and that is, what are the roles of state and municipal government in what has been traditionally federal government diplomacy, trade development, and attracting foreign direct investment? What are the advantages that you have over the federal government?
Ambassador, that's a great question, and I think in a very unsteady, unsettled time in our history, the subnational relationships are more important than they've ever been. Just to take this trip that I just got back from, I spent time with the mayor of Manchester and the mayor of Liverpool, just to talk about their priorities and what we can do better together. That's been something we've been doing in Korea for a long time. Those relationships, and really, I worked in D.C. for a long time. D.C. provides a lot of great framework and overlay, but so much really happens on the state level and the local level. And so being able to carry that torch and continue to develop those governmental relationships, that underlying business shows to politicians how important it is for them to get things done. And I think one of the things that we've seen in D.C. for a long time is just getting things done is hard right now. And so for states to continue to have that activity and connectivity and build relationships, that is a bit of a pressure valve to help Congress continue to focus. And I love having our Senate offices here today. It shows that there is the importance that our senators place on this. But I think for us to be able to have that conversation, too, about what's really happening on the ground, that helps flow back up to the bosses as they're in discussion. So I think it's more important than ever.
Commissioner, I have a question. No disrespect for Delta Airlines. My wife and I just came back from 14 years in Korea, during this. We missed Korean rail. Or Atlanta on the railroad map.
So it's funny that I just got a article that the governor sent me yesterday about Amtrak placing a priority on developing short commuter rail activities in Georgia, us being one of the hubs. $75 million that they're going to put into potentially connecting Atlanta and Birmingham, Atlanta, Charlotte, Atlanta, Savannah, and Atlanta, Macon, which I think would be fantastic. And again, I went from Edinburgh to Manchester and then to Liverpool via train, which was awesome. It's beautiful, it's relaxing, until the air conditioner went out. And that's really nice. They're not going to be able to get me from Heathrow to Atlanta, and so that's not going to take that place. But there are routes that it makes a lot of sense. I'd love that connectivity. So
You mentioned about D.C.
that would be tremendous. So my son was very much into trains when he was younger, and he and I took the overnight Amtrak train, the old Southern Crescent, to D.C. Got the little sleeper room and everything. It is not what it used to be. It's not what the pictures showed. So I would love it, but we'll see. It's just a very different thing to navigate because of the structure we've created as freight rail, of course, takes precedence in the United States, and so we have to figure out how to. You got to run on time, right? And so to do that, we have to figure out a balance. But I like it.
Pat,
Yeah, Tom.
Can you talk a little bit about Port of Savannah versus, the efficiency we have versus like LA, Long Beach, or Oakland coming here without the rates?
Sure. That's a nice softball, Tom. So, the one thing that I think sets the Port of Savannah, the Georgia ports, sets us up differently. And this was just driven home by meeting with the Port of Liverpool. Savannah is run by the state of Georgia. It's a sister agency with me. All the profit that Savannah makes by law, has to go back into efficiencies at the port. They invest in infrastructure. They invest in making sure that it's the cleanest, most efficient port that you're going to find in the United States. And so there's no profit-making piece in that. Of course, they need to turn a profit in order to continue to invest. But what you've seen is the port over the last 25, 30 years, we've had great management of the state that has continued to support the port. And we have invested in some of the most amazing long-term projects that you're going to find in the entire maritime industry. What that has done is make it easier for companies, more efficient for companies, to move their products from Asia to the United States, because you can come through the Panama Canal, come up the Savannah River Channel, and actually get your products from the boat onto a train and out to your customer quicker than you can to come in through California, which is much closer, and train in, which is amazing. And right now, there are anywhere from 80 to 100 ships sitting out of Long Beach waiting to come on to unload. You think about the amount of money that it costs each one of those carriers every day as they sit waiting to get their products off. That's money that's passed on to all of us. That's inflation in itself. Moving that around to Savannah, where at one point, because we weren't expecting to see this massive backlog in LA and companies started coming around, we had about 50 boats sitting off of Savannah. They went to a 24/7 work week, which LA has not done, and we cleared those boats off. We're now at basically a free flow of ships coming back and forth. It makes a lot of sense, and once companies make the decision to make that change and they see that it works, generally they're not going back to that. So we've seen the Port of Savannah has grown almost exponentially, the fastest growing port in the country, the third largest port in the United States, but their projections have them passing New York, New Jersey in the next 5 to 6 years. So, Tom, it's a great question. It really comes back to one of the most important reasons why Georgia's been successful.
incentives you to Korean companies to come here?
So that's a great question, too. You know, it's one of the things that, so Trevor and my friends in the media always ask about the incentives to companies when we land these big projects. And, you know, if this were an even playing field, if no state were offering incentives, Georgia would win a lot of our projects. I think that we stack up because we've been well governed. We have a great quality of life, a low tax burden. We've invested in things like the port, the airport, our roads and rail. We would win a number of projects, and I feel great about that. But it's not the playing field, not the world we live in. There are incentives for job creation because we as states place a premium on better jobs. And the question happened earlier about what does it mean when a Korean company comes in. Generally, an international company pays better when they enter a market than a lot of the surrounding companies. And so our job is to raise the quality of life for Georgians. We want better jobs. We want jobs with great benefits, great opportunities. And so for years, we've placed a premium on job creation. What I like about the way Georgia does incentives is that if you are a company in Georgia, if you're Delta Airlines, which is our largest private employer, if you grow jobs in the state, you can take advantage of the same incentives that Kia can take advantage of when they locate a facility here. All of our incentives are very much tax code based. So if you create a job, you get a job creation tax incentive for that. So when we talk about the incentives that a company like Hyundai had when they announced their facility coming to Georgia, the majority of what comes out of the state are tax code incentives. And so they are generous, and I think the General Assembly over the years has done a great job of making that system work. And then the state also has access to a small amount of discretionary incentives, but what we focus on are solutions. And so when Kia is looking to open their facility, what do we want to do? We want to make sure that we're investing in a workforce, we're investing in sites, we're investing in things that help them hit speed to market faster and become more prosperous. And so there are a number of incentives, and Hyundai, Rivian, SK. If you look at the breakdown of that, it really focuses on site preparation. We want to purchase that site. We want to make sure that we get the utilities there, we get the water, sewer, that all of that works out to meet the company's timeline. So our goal through incentives is to make sure we're addressing all the problems that a company may have in that initial startup phase. And we've seen that to be very successful. And ultimately, our goal is for that company to be prosperous because that helps everybody, back in Korea and right here at home. So I feel very comfortable about the way the state of Georgia has developed our incentive program because it really is open for anybody that continues to invest and grow jobs.
I have questions. You say a lot of we created new jobs here, but in a lot of companies, it's harder to find people.
Yeah.
So do you think it's why? And then how are we going to solve the problem?
That's a great question too, and Steve mentioned this. Yeah. So the question was, companies are bringing these great jobs to Georgia, and really the United States. Workforce continues to be an issue, right? How are we addressing workforce shortages? And Steve mentioned it. Every project that we are talking to right now, it's workforce, workforce, workforce. We as a state really have partnered with our technical college system. And I saw Steve Daniel here earlier. Steve was the backbone of a lot of the work we did with Kia to train the workforce. So we have what I believe is the best technical college system in the country. And they have, for generations now, continued to focus on not just training Georgians, but listening to the business community, understanding the jobs that are open and available, and then training Georgians to meet those needs, not necessarily one size fits all. Everybody in every part of the state gets the same education. And so our Quick Start program, which Uni brought up, which is under our technical college system, that's a discretionary incentive that we give to companies that are looking to move to Georgia. And so the goal is that the day that Kia turns on their facility, that we have a workforce that is ready-made and can run that entire facility. So we embed with the company. We send a team to Korea to understand how they train people, understand the culture, and then help translate that back to a curriculum that they then can create a workforce. And so we've got great programs on the ground right now to support companies. The key is, where do we go in the future? And I think part of that is continuing to, we as a state have benefited from a high migration over a number of years. Georgia went from the 8th largest, or the 10th largest state to the 8th largest state. Projections have us moving to the 5th largest state in the next census. There are opportunities there to, as we benefit from people that are moving in from areas without the same job opportunities that we're seeing here. And then we also have to focus on K through 12 and growing our education, our workforce organically. And I give a lot of credit to the Korean companies that have invested here, because they invest in the school systems around them. Kia is a great example, SK, of course, in Jackson County, and the money that they give to provide training for young Georgians then turns out to be the workforce of the future. So it's, it's an issue that I think every state, and really it's international right now in real, the workforce challenges we're having. But I think Georgia's well positioned to navigate that and help our companies over the long run. Anybody else? This has been great, guys. Thank you so much. Oh, one more? Oh, no, Trevor.
How much do you perceive that the decisions made by Korean investors in the boardrooms back in Korea, going back to our earlier part of the program, how much does that have to do with what's going on in the bilateral relationship and the alliance versus their business imperatives? It was interesting to see that obviously the Hyundai announcement came while President Biden was there, and then when President Moon was here before, there was a huge raft of Korean investments announced in the U.S. So I'm just curious about what you said.
Look, I think that the driving factor is business need, first and foremost, and making sure that when you're investing $5.5 billion, I mean, you got to make that case, right? That you're looking at 50 years and not just necessarily a political snapshot of what's going on today. And that's one of the things that I think we get, you get lost in. These companies are looking, decades down the road, and trends not only in consumer spending, but trends in the states that they're investing in. Where is there a track record of support? Where is there a history of being pro-business? I mean, these are things that they focus on, because it really boils down to that local piece, I think, first and foremost. And then if you can tie in, I think the timing of President Biden's trip was great, because you can celebrate the importance of this relationship overall. You can highlight how important this bilateral trade is, but that project started way before there was an announcement that Biden, anybody ever knew Biden was going to Korea. I mean, it's one of the fastest projects that we've ever worked, which is sometimes an anomaly for an international project. But that project started significantly earlier than President Biden being there. But I do think that there is, that overall political back and forth there is a piece of that touches these projects, but generally the business case has to be the driving factor. Jonathan's giving me the thumbs up. I'm done. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.